On today's episode of The Rig Doctor, I'm going to be working on Daniel's rig. Daniel is a worship player out in Virginia, but also enjoys playing blues, rock, and fusion, and he has a combination of pedals that are not only worship staples, but things that you might more commonly see on a blues or rock player's rig. I was really excited to put this together for him. It kind of fuses two sort of dissimilar ideas and makes into one really hip rig. So stay tuned. I've already started day one by putting the pedals down, so you're going to kind of see us start a little bit further on ahead than we may normally start. But if you want to reference any of the ways that we put down pedals on pedal boards, feel free to reference any of the previous Rig Doctor videos, and I'll link some above here. Let's get started.
His name is Mason Marangella. He builds rigs for the industry's top professionals. Now, he's teaching guitarists how to build rigs like the pros, with DIY tips, easy mods, and all the tricks of the trade. His name is the Rig Doctor.
So we're done with day one of Daniel's rig, and this was just a matter of going through everything, making sure that everything was in the right place, that the Velcro was down, that's the dual lock, and just making sure that everything is in its right place. All the cables are going to dress into the right place based on where the Velcro and the pedals are tied down. So we just did a really nice once over of this, made sure everything fit, and then we're going to move from there to power. I'm going to start that on day two. But I just wanted to make sure that we had that. I'm going to check in with Daniel and just make sure I kind of have everything in the correct order, make sure that we've made any adjustments that he wants before I start really doing the power and really getting it set in stone, where it's going to be a little bit harder to modify after we do this initial kind of setup phase, kind of based on our first conversation. So let's check in with Daniel, and then we'll move on to day two, which will be the power. So I'll update you once I get to that. Now, I realized after I filmed this on my phone that it doesn't record audio, so I'm gonna have to figure that out for the coming days. But for now, I'm just gonna kind of give you a basic idea of what the conversation was. Essentially, I had made some presumptions about how Daniel was going to use some of the pedals, like the boost and the tumnus, for example, and kind of how I would have done it versus how he does it. And I typically would have put the boost after everything. But he's putting the tumnus after everything and kind of using that as the clean boost, the kind of Klon style clean boost. Then he's using the prism before everything, even before the compressor, to kind of use it as like a guitar shaping tool. And I actually, when I tried it, I thought he was actually right. It's a really good sort of pre-gain boost. Whereas the tumnus, although I think it still fits better pre-gain for what he likes, it seemed to work a little bit better. So we just got clear on our organization, and we're able to get a more streamlined process for the pedal board layout based on his actual application, in using it at church, which is his primary use for the pedal board. So just understanding more about exactly what he wants and how he uses it now, and making sure he can recreate the songs that he's responsible for playing in worship. We wanted to make sure that we could represent that as well as possible. So we can see here on Daniel's rig that pretty standard setup, kind of along the lines of what we did for Rhett Shull. It's got an ES8 instead of the ES5. We're not really doing a true Strymon bridge. We have some of the Boss pedals in there, the 500 series of the delay and modulation unit, and then we have the Bigsky, and then a Jam Man looper on this one as part of the Strymon bridge. And as you heard, we made a few adjustments, so I changed a few of the words on the switcher there, so I kind of know what's going to correspond to what. Again, it's all kind of a wash because you can rearrange the order no matter what. Here's the back row. We got the prism coming first, so that's going to be kind of an always on, and also the compressor, the Deep 6, and then the organizer kind of doing the organ stuff, and then the Euphoria, Prince of Tone, and then ending with the tumnus. Then we're going to come up here, go to the MD 500, then over to the DD 500, Bigsky, and then ending with the Jam Man looper. I should also mention the Scarlett Love in there is going to come before the tumnus. This is kind of for his kind of Marshall-y plexi style sound, and then of course all powered by the True Tone CS12. I should also mention the micro clock here. That's just syncing the tap tempo for these two guys, the Boss series stuff. I also have a custom interface that I built. So this just has a mono in with a shorting jack there, and then a stereo out. That unit is just passive. We're going to be using the buffers out of the Boss unit since those are programmable. So we want to make sure that we have those so that we can engage them for cleans, maybe take them away for some of the dirty stuff. So that's where we are, day one. So we have day two mostly done. We started with the power supply and then we moved into getting everything wired out to the pedals. The one problem that we did run into was we were short on power outputs, and normally I would combine those through one output to make sure that they could all work off the same milliamps, but I went through and I measured using the True Tone one spot version of the milliamp reader, which is a great product, which I'll link here, and these are mostly getting at minimum 100 milliamps per overdrive pedal in most cases, or boost pedal. So we don't really have the ability to be able to share, so I had to go in and add a second power supply, and I'll just add a tap internally so that you don't have to plug in two IECs. I'll do a little bit more information on that a little bit later, but that's just to make sure that we have good power for everything, because if I were to combine things, it would actually be underpowering it, and it could potentially add some noise and cause some issues and functions with the pedals, so I really wanted to avoid that happening. So we have to use a second power supply. I don't want to do it, but it's the only way that we're going to be able to get all this stuff. So I'm going to call up Daniel and kind of let him know what's going on and kind of see where to go from here, because I don't see any other way that we can continue to build the rig and get him what he wants without adding this second power supply. But again, it won't be too much of an eyesore. It'll be hidden under the lift, and I will basically internally wire like a 3-prong AC cable essentially internally going off of one and coming into the other, and I'll just use kind of some nice rubber grommets, drill out the enclosures slightly on the power supplies and make that so it's all really, streamlined, easy to hide, and it's not going to be bumped or tampered with in any way, so it'll be really stable for him. So let's hope Daniel's okay with this.
Your call has been forwarded to an automated voice messaging system. At the tone, please record your message. When you've finished recording, you may hang up or press 1 for more options.
Hey Daniel, it's Mason calling from Vertex. I just wanted to update you on kind of where we are with the power supply. It looks like we're going to have to actually add another small one. I measured all of the milliamps on all the drive pedals, and almost all of them are at 100. Like the Boost is at 100, the Scarlett Love is at 100. And then some of them will not take 18 volts, and so I'm using the King of Tone, or the Prince of Tone rather, and the Ecstasy at 18 volts. I'm using the other ones at 9, but I just don't think we're going to be able to get everything on one power supply on this one, just because a lot of the overdrives can't be combined. So just want to get your permission on that before we move forward and get this all taken care of, so let me know. Bye-bye. We're getting into day 3 now, and this is kind of where everything starts to come together and it's starting to look like a real pedal board. I've gotten the clearance from Daniel to go ahead and add that second power supply. I'm going to kind of show you a little bit more closely visually how this works once we get back into the shop. But you can see that essentially what we're doing in order to combine these, because he was like, I'll take a second power supply, but I don't want to be plugging in two IECs. We essentially went inside of each of them and just basically jumpered another IEC cable that I just cut, which is just a kind of a standard sort of like power cord that you would find, I don't know, for an extension cord or something like that. We left all the insulation on it, and then we just kind of wired it from one into the next, and basically just soldering on top of the existing ports that are already in existence for the IEC. This just makes it so that any IEC cable, whether it's on one power supply or the other, although one of them is going to be pretty hard to read, so you pretty much have to use the larger CS12 to access the IEC. But if it were to be taken off this pedal board and used in something else, any single IEC into either one of them will carry power to the other. So it's just an easy way to connect two power supplies, and they don't all have to be accessible externally in order to make this happen. So that's kind of a cool feature. I should warn that by doing this, it voids the warranty, I'm sure, although I can't say exactly what line item on True Tone's website that would be. But if I were them, I wouldn't guarantee any of this. However, it's a pretty safe mod. All it's really doing is just soldering on top of what's already there, and then just drilling these holes. And they actually already have portholes on a couple of the power supplies where you might ordinarily mount them to a pedal train or another sort of modular pedal board system. Sorry. So quick check in here. We have pretty much done all of the power. We're getting into the audio side, kind of got it organized but not terminated into any of the pedals. I want to shed a little light on what we did here with these power supplies, because we needed to use a second power supply, and we normally would have to connect both of these with an IEC. So you'd have to have two connectors, one going into the back of each. However, as you can see here, I've actually routed a AC cable and attached it to the actual power supply tap. And I'm routing it into this guy. So they're connected to each other. It just takes one single IEC in the back of the True Tone One Spot CS12, and then that comes over here and links to the CS7. So we have power to everything. So that's where we are for today. Check back in this afternoon, see if we can get this all finished up on day 3. It's looking good. Now that we're at day 3, we're starting to get into the cabling. I've already kind of pre-soldered a good group of the cables for this. I just wanted to make sure that we had kind of some predetermined lengths for certain things. And that's one easy way, or a secret that I like to do on a switcher, is I kind of determine kind of what are the rough estimate in terms of lengths, and then I pre-solder one side of them so that I'm really only having to route and dress into the pedal itself, or if I wanted to start on the pedal end, I'd be routing and dressing into the actual switcher. So this just helps keep it really clean, helps keep it really organized, and helps me stay on track so that I know what's going where, because there's so many cables and so many moving parts that it's easy to get lost on a switcher. So I always put blue painter's tape and label all of the ends that I haven't soldered so I know exactly what they correspond to on the switcher side. And I usually try to be careful in the order with which I terminate these when it goes into the pedal so that I don't have kind of a mismatch. So like if I'm working on loop 1, I'm only going to be soldering and terminating loop 1. I'm not going to involve other loops at that point, just because it adds to the confusion that's already kind of there and inherent in doing a rig like this. So just wanted to point that out for those of you that are going to be wiring switchers yourself. Just get some blue painter's tape. I'm going to link some below, and you can use that and get it at any hardware store, and just use it to mark up whatever these cables are and what they're going to, so that you don't accidentally wire a send to a return or do something silly like that, or wire loop 5 to loop 4 accidentally, things like that. So just a real easy way to stay organized. The goal today is really just to get it finished up and see if we can get into the testing at least today, so then that way I can get it back to Daniel this week and kind of do a nice unveiling for him. So we'll see what we come up with. Whew. So that was a day. It's still light outside, which is great because we're not in daylight savings anymore here in California, but we were able to get this thing finished. I haven't got a chance to audio test it today, but I invited over my friend Alex Doty. He's going to come over tomorrow, and he plays in a lot of worship services, and so he has a lot of experience with this type of music, more so than I do as a player. So I'm going to have him kind of create some basic tones here so we can hear this rig in stereo, which is kind of the full intention for how Daniel wanted to use it in worship, in stereo. So we want to kind of try to recreate that, get some clean tones, get some dirty tones. So now that this thing is done, it looks really, really beautiful. It turned out incredibly well. And in the testing, just completely dead quiet, no issues having that second power supply on there. So I was glad that we were able to make it fit with 2 power supplies, not have to expand anything in terms of size, because that can be a real nightmare. We were able to get this really, really nicely put down for Daniel, get everything nice and organized. So I can't wait to give him a call. I'm going to try to hit him up maybe tomorrow morning, because it's a little bit late here. It's kind of 3 hours ahead in Virginia where he is. So I might give him a break until tomorrow morning, but we'll see if he responds to my text, and if so, I'll call him up and kind of give him an unveiling. We'll see what he thinks of this thing. All right, Daniel, so we're all finished with the board. Sound checked it. Sounds incredible. I'm going to take you now into the office, give you a sneak peek so you can see what you think. Let's check it out.
Awesome.
And here she is.
That is so clean.
So everything on the back here, I've got it kind of really nicely labeled, just in case if any point in the future, a technician or somebody else had to work on it, or you couldn't send it back to me, you would know kind of where all the cables were. Everything's kind of labeled with all the loops. On On the front side here, I've just put like the MIDI channels for, you know, like the Strymon and for the Boss pedals, so you kind of know what MIDI channels they're on, so when you're doing your programming through the ES8, you know what's what.
That looks so good.
So we've got it all kind of nicely labeled for you here, so you can see like what's stereo and what's mono. So it makes it real easy. And of course everything is on the exterior, has whatever loop it's in, so you kind of know, you know, where it is. But it sounds great, it looks great, and I think you're going to be really happy with it.
Oh, thank you so much. This is amazing.
I'm really glad that we were able to get this, and I think you'll have it just in time for Sunday.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much. It looks so good.
Absolutely.
Yes, sir.
All right, enjoy.
Woo. Thank you.
Well, Alex really killed it there and did an amazing job of recreating some of the tones that this rig would actually be used for once it arrives to Daniel. I'm going to be shipping this thing back to him in a nice Pelican case, so that'll be going back to him this week, and hopefully he'll have this ready to play at his next worship service this coming Sunday. So I hope it arrives in time. It was a really, really cool experience to be able to do this for Daniel. I've done a lot of rigs for praise and worship players, but I've never got to document one like this. So it was a lot of fun to be able to kind of document the way that we use the switcher. I really appreciated the types of pedals that Daniel used. It wasn't necessarily the go-to that we see a lot of worship players use, but it is a go-to for a lot of rock and blues players. So I appreciate that he was able to integrate some tones of not only worship music, but also secular music to be able to get a really nice blend of great distortion tones and really, really nice ambient stuff. I think the Boss DD500 was one of my pleasant surprises. I know that my friend Reinhold Wagner talks about these all the time as being one of his favorite delays, because not only it works great in front of an amp, but it works great into a loop. And you know, I've heard it kind of just as a passerby, but never really heard it in my own hands and kind of how I experience delays. And I have to say, it is an incredible delay. Being able to activate 2 delays simultaneously in it and being able to manipulate those, that just opens up a whole world of new ideas. You can get some of those really cool edge tones, of course, because you can have, you know, the 2 delays happening simultaneously. That was a real surprise on this one, and I would say if there's those of you that, you know, are struggling with your Strymons, as great as those are, I definitely think that these Boss units are pretty darn good. MD500, no complaints there, just a really great all-around modulation device, but the DD500 really stood out to me as sounding great. I didn't, of course, have the reverb unit because Daniel, in this case, went with the BIGSKY, but I've also heard that those are great, so maybe worth checking out if you're considering some alternatives to the Strymon bridge sort of thing and you wanted to put some Boss pedals on there. We did sort of a hybrid here of part Boss, part Strymon, and even have a Digitech Janman looper for any of those sort of looping things for Daniel to play some. Thank you again for watching. I was really happy to be able to get this done for Daniel and really make it a rig that he can use weekend in and weekend out at worship service, and also for any other potential gigs that he may come up with. This rig could definitely pull off a blues jam, although it might be a little overkill compared to what the guys are using typically there, but it's got all the right tones for that. You set some basic delays, a little slapback, maybe a little tremolo, have a nice spring reverb, and you got Prince of Tone, you got the Euphoria, you got the Tumnus, you got pretty much anything that you would need in order to make those tones work, and then you can show up to church on Sunday and get some incredibly brilliant, big and lush tones that are going to be great for worship service. So I really appreciate Daniel for giving me a chance to build this for him, and thank you again for watching. If you are interested in learning more about this, please go and check out the description. I've linked all the stuff that I've used and materials for this so that you can do this yourself. If you like what you saw today, please make sure to do the things that you like, you subscribe, you leave a comment. All those things help our channel get optimized with YouTube. So please make sure you do those things. And if you want to make sure that you're always up to date with the latest stuff that we're putting out, hit the bell icon next to the subscription button, and that will just send you a notification whenever we put up something new. Thank you again for watching. I'm Uncle Mason, the Rig Doctor. Adios.